Welcome to Entangled Health, where we explore the intersections of quantum science, AI, biotechnology, and human well-being. My name is Thomas, and I'm convinced that health innovation happens at the entangled boundaries, where cutting-edge physics meets biology, where consciousness research intersects with technology, and where visionary thinking transforms into practical solutions. We're bringing together pioneers, researchers, and innovators who are reshaping how we understand and experience health. My guest today is John Barnes, founder CEO of Entangled Positions and UK president of OneQuantum. Now think of the quantum world as a big concert. John is a true pioneer who has been conducting the global quantum workforce since 2014. We will discuss his quite remarkable journey building this global community from the ground up and how he orchestrates talent from emerging researchers to C-suite leaders. We will also explore how his love for live music and rugby influence the health and culture of the quantum ecosystem. We will dive into his vision for a quantum Woodstock moment, a responsible and thriving quantum future, and much more. A quick disclaimer, all chats at Entangled Health are a co-creation between the guest and myself and not an official statement from our industries. John and I are here in a personal capacity, so everything we share is just our own take, not the official view of his company, nor of my employer or any other organization. To add a little bit of dopamine, later in the show we'll dive into the Entangled Health question pool, where curiosity lives in Hilbert space. And here's how this works. 1. You submit a question via LinkedIn or episode comments. 1 per listener, keep it spicy. 2. A quantum algorithm running on real hardware picks which one we answer. And 3rd, our guests add their own question to the pool and then answered it live. The rules for now, it's quite simple. Ask anything. The guest might decline, but where's the fun in playing safe? And if you reach 1 million listeners, we might change the rules, but that's a bit far out. Stay tuned, and who knows what the quantum dice will reveal. So music ends. Hi, John. So this is so cool. So we had a little bit of technical onboarding, but I think we should have done video because it's cool to see you dancing. So the idea for all our listeners, the idea of the podcast is in principle a reaction to something that I often get when a question mark, who, when I talk to people in the community and they say, I don't know this guy or this person. So I think the podcast is really to bring people together who should know each other. And who better to have you, because it's kind of your job to do that exactly for the quantum community. So I'm not fishing in your turf, I hope. And I think the best is to start with who we are, what brought us to where we are today. But before I ask everyone, when you first heard the Entangled Health, the topic, what came to your mind, John? Can you share a bit on that?
Yeah, so I think the first thing I thought of was around the sort of the health of quantum and the ecosystem, and I think it was more the almost like the mental health of quantum. So, where are we going? What do we want to achieve? How do we get there? Who's this for? And that kind of existential aspects of it. And I think, so rather than the sort of checking the blood pressure and running some scans, more the sort of the therapy side of things and sort of unloading. And I think that the jazz that started, the sort of unstructured nature of jazz, is quite nice with that. There's a lot of serendipity at the moment, and I think actually ride the chaos.
Cool. So, yeah. I mean, we can maybe dig a bit deeper how you define this wealth of the community or so, but let's just look where this is taking us. I know that you're a big music fan, and I think it was even you who invented this name for this gang who is playing at the Quantum Tech, so called Iron Maiden. I think it was you who brought this up. So, okay. Tell me more. So I think you have a fantastic career not only in quantum. I think you started in 2004 with recruiting, and then you moved 2014 into the quantum pioneer phase. So just tell us. You can even go from school if you want. But
Well, school. I think school really I came from Essex, so school sort of passes you by a little bit. It's just something you have to do. It's not really to educate you, to keep you in a room somewhere and out of trouble, I think, more than anything. And I think since was it 22 or 23 when I came up with the name Ion Maiden, obviously it's all downhill from then. You're never going to get a greater moment than that. So everything was leading up to that and downhill afterwards. But no, jokes aside. So unusually for people working in quantum, particularly those that have been working in quantum for a long time, for a long time I was the only person without a PhD in quantum. It felt like. Not only that, I didn't go to university at all, and so I was lecturing PhDs and postdocs before I even took part in a bachelor's degree, which is a little bit of a weird way of going about it. But to my sort of relevant career, so I started in tech recruitment in 2004. A lot of it based around sort of software, which leads on to sort of banking, telco, data topics, early AI, robotics, machine learning, and all sorts of weird and wonderful stuff. Much more applications focused than what I then went into. But in 2014, I took my first steps into quantum, and this was someone that I'd worked with previously as a sort of a high level candidate. They reached out to me and said, John, I spoke to a lot of recruiters. You were the only person I liked the way they worked. I'm building a photonic quantum computer and all the subsystems. Can you help me find the team? And I answered yes before I realized what I'd said yes to.
So this was a photonic, you said?
Yeah.
Wow. Well, we can maybe talk about this later, but just go on.
Yeah, and obviously this would be tied. I didn't realise at the time, but this would be tied in with the UK government's first quantum strategy or quantum investments in 2014. So kind of at the very early stages, albeit in a serendipitous way, So then I kind of, was really fascinating, threw myself into it. But you had there was a distinct lack of middle ground. So there was. On the one side, there was some very scant reports in the paper now and again, but very rare and all totally wrong. You had some dishwasher tablets that were named quantum. There was a quantum.
Yes, I have these.
Yeah. There was a quantum recruitment company do everything but quantum. And then there was a big space until you maybe got to the Feynman lectures and things like that. So,
yes. Wow.
So there was quite a big gap. So to try and get my head around it was a bit of a challenge. And I think it's nice to see so much material now to make it so much more accessible. And I look back and think my epiphany, it kind of came. So I was looking at the double slit experiment.
Okay.
And my brain was naturally thinking, well, why? Why does it do that? And for about 2 weeks, my head was just stretching and stretching and stretching and stretching and stretching.
Yeah, you can still see it.
People say I can't walk through doors because my head's too big anyway, but this made it even worse. I couldn't get into the garage. And then after about 2 weeks, my epiphany moment was, I'm not the person who's going to work this out. It doesn't matter. I don't need to do that. That's not my job. That's not my role. Stay in your own lane. And okay. I sort of thought, well, people that are far cleverer than me show this is demonstrably and repeatably true. I can just accept it. But, that's my job. I'm not the one in the lab doing it, so it's not me. I'm still not allowed to play with lasers or write algorithms or anything like that in the lab to this day, which is safest.
Oh.
So 2014, I sort of started in quantum and was working some sort of robotic software AI type roles alongside that. But gradually became more and more quantum focused, and there wasn't really an industry as such at the time. There were a couple of big names, your IBMs and D-Waves, a couple of science projects and university spin-out type initiatives. So to transition into it was, significantly too early. But hey, if you don't
it's
try,
the downside of being innovative.
But what it did do, it meant I could make all of my mistakes when no one was watching. There was no money, no focus. So you talk to people, you get things wildly wrong. asking questions about quantum teleportation that really aren't anything to do. They're more sort of Star Trek teleportation with my mindset. But I could ask those questions, no wrong question, and all those sorts of things. But it meant that I got to learn about all the related pieces. So, cryogenics, photonics and optics, lasers, algorithm development, and all of these pieces that support quantum. Working with the suppliers, for example, and just speaking to a really wide range of different people. Albeit for the most part, I had to shift from having a commercially focused conversations where clients are interested in, how long have you done this for? What have you done? What are your results? Academics takes second place compared to what you've done commercially. So you're very much focused working with academics, postdocs, PhDs, some master students, often not directly with quantum experience or older quantum experience, because there wasn't a workplace for them to work. So they'd maybe gone out, worked somewhere else, and wanted to come back in, and then sort of saw that develop massively over time. So, and I think that the big change that I noticed, and this was kind of the trigger to go from my previous company, Profector Associates, to Entangled Positions, where it was basically me doing the same sort of work, but before I was going under the radar because it was a small ecosystem. You had to work quite hard to make anything from it, and it was about focusing on the work. To when the pandemic struck, and a little bit before, you kind of had a trifecta. You had the technology maturing, the investments maturing, and then the catalyst was people communicating differently. Everyone was doing webinars online, and everyone was talking online, and it changed everything.
Yes, true. So, I can just share that, and then I'll let you continue. we had this similar experience because we have been organizing this applied quantum thing. This is when end 2018, so before COVID, briefly before COVID. And we had each and every one, so including those guys maybe that ask you for a job, but because there was really this phase shift, or I'm not sure if it's a quantum leap, but it from one moment it came from nobody talks about it to the community is going to build. So, and I think you also did some work in the background to make this happen, no? So to bring these people also together, or.
Yeah, so I noticed that. So you kind of had. So I used to, for example, go to maybe Photonics West or Late World of Photonics in Munich or wherever it might be. The National Quantum Showcase in the UK and these sort of things. Yeah. And then all of a sudden, the events organisers put it all online, and a lot of trial and error. And as there was when the pandemic hit and people couldn't travel and all of that sort of stuff, nobody had the roadmap for it.
Yes. Yeah.
But it meant that you could communicate in a different way. And I remember going to the Women in Quantum event, and I wasn't sure whether I should be there. And sort of, I didn't know whether I'd be.
You semi-qualify me.
And it was absolutely fine. It was a warm, welcoming place, and I got labelled very quickly a man-ambassador.
Yeah, it's a great place. Yeah.
But they had this kind of, it's almost like a speed dating networking type thing, and you were just speaking to people, and it changed the whole dynamic. And giving talks to the OSA as it was then, and IOP and groups like this, and doing it virtually, it meant you could do a lot more. There's still a great value to being in person, speaking and speaking at events, but you could do a lot more things like this, where actually you can have these conversations. There's such the barrier to entry is reduced significantly, and I think this was a real catalyst for ideas to change and move and to move around. So I think that integration has kind of been my mantra within quantum for about the last 5 years, and this is whether it's integrating software and hardware, nation to nation, government, academia, industry, or whatever. And how many of these moments in science come from, a chemist and a physicist just have a coffee or a tea at the same time, talk about their work, and the next thing you've got this amazing development that
triple billion bit.
And it was a bit like that. You had all of these people communicating, and you were just this information and ideas was flowing, and I think this really helped. So the community was quite strong before, but it was a little bit siloed.
Yeah,
this really helped everyone share ideas more rapidly.
Yeah.
And I think there was also the barrier to entry was lesser for people outside of quantum.
Mm-hmm.
So you had the kind of the blossom, this real flourishing of quantum enthusiasts that were interested, didn't know a lot about it, but thought it's fascinating, and maybe they'd watched Ant-Man, got it all wrong. But hey, that's what started. That started there. That started their journey, and everyone starts something. Mine was the double slit experiment. For other people, it may be this, and probably most people, it's wrong what we think when we start, and it probably is wrong for most people now. There's going to be things that change.
Yeah, you never know.
But that's part of the fun. And once people got into the community, they could then develop and grow and build these connections. Realize it's fine. Nobody knows it all, and that's fine. And and then there was this stimulus that from the sort of the human and public side of things.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, there was more money coming into companies, so they were looking to scale and grow. And in the backdrop to that was universities had been producing more and more talented people, or refining people, training talented people to be able to do amazing things. And then within each year, those people were each getting a step further and a step further, and there was this sort of composite growth where the individuals grew rapidly, but that had a multiplier effect with those around.
And I think our joint friend Chris Bishop, who is one, by the way, Chris, if you ever hear this, you're one of the guy who made me dare jump to this podcast myself. No, but I think he was also back then with the IQT guys. So, and I recall that this was my entry drug to quantum, because whoever asked me, was it Lawrence or whoever, to say, okay, do you want to be on a panel? I said, I don't know. And then I don't know, and this was virtual, so I was at IQT here in the evening, and the next morning I was speaking in Washington, and the next one I was in Japan on a conference, which of course only works in this pandemic restricted way where you had these virtual conferences. So I think it's really cool that you confirm, although that you bring this up from your side, and how to just maybe going to your current role of the entangled positions, and maybe also looking at this a bit from what we initially discussed, the health of the community. So we had COVID, which was maybe a global pandemic, but did it trigger eventually even a positive effect that now everybody was immune to isolation after it was over, and there was a better communication triggered by that? Or
so I think with these things, that there's the bad times almost stimulate growth in a way that times don't. If you have the best time to start a business is in a recession. These kind of things, and it's kind of counterintuitive. And obviously, there's a lot of pain and suffering from the pandemic, and but that is not to undermine any of that. But these things change, and there were positives to come from it. And I think the way people communicated was one of those. I remember with the music. I remember afterwards, I hadn't heard live music for a few years, and I was walking along, and there were some people playing outside, and I sat down. It nearly brought me to tears because I didn't realize how much I'd missed it. And I think when you look at the quantum ecosystem, as people started to be able to move and travel again, you realize that great, this virtual stuff's fantastic and a really good tool, but the in-person stuff, you cherish it more. And I think I was on, so I did one of the virtual IQTs during the pandemic, funnily enough, with Chris as well. And I think, with Chris's improvising careers and how to succeed at jobs that don't yet exist, we kind of we work on quite a few different things together. And if there's anyone out there that doesn't know Chris, I can't imagine there is. If not, I would certainly recommend listening to some of Chris's stuff, and not just as a moderator, but also his music contribution, and the music, and so he's done a bit of everything. So what, but I think this when people then interacted again together, there was this real understanding of the importance of it. And I was at the Economist was one of the first events afterwards, and and I think about 70% of the people that went there had COVID afterwards because of the dynamics of the room. Which
we thank the Economist here.
Which I'm sure that wasn't just these things are probably happening. It was the but these were the sorts of things that it really made people relish that, and even from looking at the employment or worker side of things. So, if you're working on software or algorithms, it's you can be remote relatively easily, and actually, you can. It's more important from a cultural perspective that you see the team and you interact as human to human. But when people are working in labs, that's far more difficult.
Yes,
and people were finding ways around. So it's not the productivity they would usually have, but they were finding ways around to still keep moving forward.
Still keep touching the hardware and fiddling with stuff.
So we to put it onto a recruitment perspective, sometimes if you go back sort of 20 years and your system's gone down as a power cut, okay, what have you got you can keep working with? I know I've got my notes, there's phone numbers in now, I can phone people, don't need the database. And it's a little bit like that, how can you, what's your contingency if all fails? And I think those problem-solving skills were important, and particularly I think in quantum, because there's a large selection of people that come from academia where the problem-solving skills are very different to working in the commercial arena. Time means a whole different thing. In the commercial world, if you've got a hard deadline of Tuesday, it's Tuesday, or it doesn't. It never happened. If you're doing a PhD, for example, it's more important that actually the quality of the research you're satisfied with, as opposed to the time it takes. And actually, I think these sharpening of mindsets around what can we do when time does matter, and I think it also helped create this sense of community because there were more engagements online. So I think there's a whole mix of things blurring together that came along at the same time. And I think all good stories tend to have those things where these different streams merge together.
And I think this brings me to a line of thought that when brainstorming what to ask you came up with orchestrating and curating. And I think this is what you just mentioned. I mean, it's really dancing or orchestrating all these different expectations from an ambitious, PhD student who is just finalizing her studies or whatever, to deep quality, and I want to do this in the best thing, to the company and says, now my shareholders want to have this installed tomorrow, blah, blah. So, and then knowing you are a fantastic person, I think there's nobody who cannot just be friends with you because you're just really inclusive, and also brings me to diversity. So you really take care of expecting the cultural backgrounds and bringing so managing also these if there are cultural differences. So can you share a bit more how you do that? I mean, or is it your secret sauce?
So I think so. I was always, so growing up, I was always so you treat people as an individual, and there's a so I think when you look at these matters, so you can look to these issues. They've changed drastically in recent times, and there's I think there's a lot of goods, but there's also some things that need to be looked at. There's some things that are almost perceived as we've solved that, and we haven't at all. We've not even close. So I think when you look at quantum, I think the starting point and what's really important is quantum is it's got a lot of positives going for it in these matters. It founded on people that. So when I first started working in quantum, there's two kinds of people for the most part. There was the ones that wanted to do some really cool scientific thing that would just wow everyone because it was the best invention or whatever you could ever make, and the other was, I want to change the world for the better.
You didn't have the naysayers? I mean.
Oh yeah, of course. But I was speaking to people in quantum.
Okay.
I'm talking about people that are doing stuff with quantum. I mean, it's and so you kind of had these two things, and it wasn't driven by this. It was much more ideological than sort of just greed or power and things like that. And I think so that's something that we should cherish, and we've been able to create this ecosystem from the ground up.
Yeah.
So I
Yes.
think that's important. And on a personal level, when I recruit, when I speak to people, in pretty much every call, I take the basic details and I say, okay, the biggest, most important question I can ask you today are, what are your main goals and aspirations? What's most important? Because over the years, I've worked with clients, and until recently, I never had people saying that I want the person to look like this or be this type of person. And I still struggle when people ask me for that, because I treat people as an individual. What shape, size, color, whatever they're in doesn't actually matter to me. It's the individual, and it's so arbitrary, So, but I treating people as an individual and asking, what they like, what they want to do, what motivates them, and if they don't know that, get them to think about that, because that's the important thing. And in quantum, it's basically underpins the physical universe. So at some point, you can do whatever you want in quantum. It will touch onto that. Whether it's ready yet, it's a different matter, but potential is there.
Yeah.
So, and I'm often asked, what do I need to do to work in quantum? And I kind of say, well, actually turn that around. What do you want to do? Because once you know what you want to do, you can work out how to get there. If you want to be an algorithm developer, you don't necessarily want to start in a lab doing optics. That might not be the best stuff. And I think these aspects of speaking to people and understanding people is the starting point. And I think I'd really reference that. Treat people as an individual and find out what motivates them, and rather than just assume that someone is this, therefore they're this.
Yeah, and I think this approach to be open, but I mean, you've seen a lot, I guess. Does this help you? Talking about maybe the resilience of the quantum community, because sometimes we might build us our own bubble.
Yeah.
As a community, and then you even develop an immune system that people who have a different opinion and come with a novel approach of a novel qubit, they just maybe the community is allergic to that. I don't know. So is this something you observe, or I mean, I guess you have to lot of improvise. If, for example, somebody comes and say, I'm working on mushrooms, and I think mushrooms have a mycelium which are entangled. So this means I want to contribute my biological, talk about quantum bio, I want to bring this in and transform the community. Is this something you are allergic to, or how would you react to that? I'm just curious.
Well, I need a certain amount of humility, because I'm not a scientist. So in the quantum world,
you mean
I'm really rare. I'm really rare in the quantum world. Outside of the quantum world, I'm not rare, and quantum people are rare. So that breeds a certain humility, and I think so it's not for me to tell scientists how to do science. That's just
comes back to your insight, to your epiphany.
yeah. I'm not qualified to do that. So
cool. Okay, that's good.
And I think it's about knowing your role within the ecosystem. And I'm quite happy to I've been around long enough to know, actually I don't know that, or necessarily know. There's better people in the audience to talk about this than me with some things, and other things not so much. And I think that's important. But when you spoke about resilience, and I think this is something that's important, because having come from heavy commercial focused industries into a more research and innovation focused ecosystem where a lot of things are funded through investment rather than profits, it's a really different mindset, and that kind of academic versus commercial juxtaposition. So I came from one background of how to adapt to the other, and it's often I talk about the transition from academia to industry, and actually one of the biggest things that's overlooked is resilience. How do things won't always go your way. There's competition out there. You won't. Not every. You work hard to get a PhD, and are really hard, but there's not the same level of competition as there is in the commercial world. In the commercial world, it's not just doing it, it's getting there first and doing it, or having the marketing or the product or all of these things luck's a big thing. So I think there's a big issue around resilience, or not, the resilience is a really important thing. And I would also say that imposter syndrome, overcoming imposter syndrome is really important as well.
Yeah, tell me, what do you mean with that?
So often when people come from academia to industry, they have imposter syndrome. So they think, I shouldn't really be here. I'm not quite good enough for this. And it's not usually true. And we all feel this.
Yes.
And it was strange, actually, because before I started talking about this, I didn't realize that I was kind of that, So, I had working with all PhDs and things like that. I didn't have the PhD, and I had the confidence to ask questions and learn and things like that. But I was the fish swimming, the fish that had swum from the wrong way up the stream, relative to the people I was talking to. And the first time I started giving talks, it shocked me that these people that are PhDs and postdocs and everything else are listening to what I've got to say. And then over time, then you're sort of teaching them how to overcome imposter syndrome, and it's like, well,
look at me.
yeah. And I'm quite a good example. I'm quite a good example, and I think these are the things. And sometimes until you speak about it, you don't necessarily know. And I think this is the thing. In quantum, we work in, generally speaking, we work in quite a humble environment. People are very much more focused on the work and the things they're doing as opposed to themselves and their own ego. And that's, for the most part, that's good. But actually having the confidence and assurity to be able to advocate for what you're doing and why it's important, and yourself as an individual, that's something that I think it's probably easier for me to teach someone that than it would be for them to teach me, quantum mechanics and what to do in a lab. So there's, at least that's how I think. And lots of quantum physicists think the other way. Think it would be easier to teach me high-end quantum mechanics than it would be to learn that. So there's different strokes for different folks.
Yeah, and I think as you just mentioned, modesty. I think that's true for all nice people. At least once we are a certain age, we overcome ego. But on the other hand, we both love live music, and I mean live music and being on a big stage sometimes works with modest people on the stage, but sometimes they're just maybe at least on stage not modest. Is there something that we can learn from that? I'm just asking stupid questions. Is there something that could inspire, or can we learn from these, that maybe a stage is different than real life, or so, for developing the ecosystem, or for producing trailblazers that might be trailblazers on stage, but normal people not on stage?
Yeah. I think it's that kind of that performer's rush. So whilst I love live music, and my ears are amazing at musical receptors, I've got no particular musical talent. So I'm the groupie more than the rock star.
Yes, a good one, by the way.
But from playing sport, I used to, the bigger the occasion, the more people watching, the bigger the crowd, the bigger the moment, penalty shootout, whatever it might be. That was the moments I thrived in. The more that was on it, the more that I relished that. I think actually when you do something that you love, that there's an element where when you're very passionate and good at something, you don't think about what you're doing. Yes. You go onto autopilot. You go into this automated zone, and you're kind of less consciously thinking, and more it's more you're acting on instincts a little bit. And there's certain things that so with science, it's 90% perspiration, 10% inspiration, or was it? And it's a little bit of that, So I think with that, riding those moments of inspiration and not being constrained by the norm, because we wouldn't be talking about quantum if people didn't think some really weird thoughts, that if they were a bit shy and didn't have the if they didn't have that out of the box thinking, we wouldn't be having this podcast, because we'd still be looking at Newtonian physics, which is great and works in most situations, but that there is a world beyond that, and we would be stuck there. Or if it wasn't for Newton, we'd still be talking about Archimedes and the sort of Greek.
Why not?
and they still work for the large part, but it's these people that take the leap of faith that change stuff, and
we wouldn't have lasers to blast.
Exactly.
But as you just mentioned, this triggered a thought that we just ad hoc. I'm not sure if you know Stephen Alexander. So I guess he wrote this book, The Jazz of Physics. I just have to improvise a bit myself. But I recall when I read his book that he's a physician and a jazz player, both professional, and he said something about this uncertainty principle, that when you play a solo and you're just fully in the flow, you have no clue where it's going to lead you, but at least you're in the flow, and it will be a perfect one. And if you have an idea what you want to play, you just it just doesn't work. So I think that's maybe what you just mentioned with if you love something and you have a passion for something, and then the crowd is rather pushing you instead of
You almost sort of, you finish what you're doing and you come back in the real world and everyone's cheering. Obviously, in the lab, in the lab or on the laptop is slightly different. You cheer yourself, but you still get that sense of elation, that sense of achievement, that sense of wow, what have I just done? And I think cherishing that and relishing that and necessarily you're going to be out of your comfort zone a little bit, because it's not scripted. You're not acting. You're not doing something that it's not a repetition of a task. You're doing something novel. Whether a lot of the time it may be novel for the world, but it's certainly going to be novel for yourself. And I think cherishing and relishing that, and getting out of that comfort zone is a good thing. Yeah.
I think this brings us in the zone of either going mentor or going philosophy. Let's maybe go first mentor role. When I looked or listened to what you said in the past, how far? I mean, I think you have also a bit of a mentor role sometimes to these people. And now imagine you yourself would be mentored by you today. So if you looking back 20 years, I think it's always a stupid question. What would you tell your younger self or your older self or something? But do you have an idea what you could have said to the younger John with what you know now, or is everything just progressing as unpredicted and as good as it could have?
So I think probably the sorts of things I'd focus on would be things that were already maybe in the toolbox, but to really make those a bigger part. So, we've spoken about sort of staying humble, and I think that's really important. And that was always in there, but as your younger self is never quite as humble as your older self.
Not as old, well.
And you perhaps have less of a sense of a sense of what's around you, and you're maybe more focused on yourself, and you just maybe less experiences and less guidance. And I think as well, to focus on speaking to as many people as possible, and chasing ideas that maybe aren't the ideas you've got. So getting out of the echo chamber and encouraging conversation with people who have a difference of opinion, because I think that's something that it's nice and comfortable speaking to someone with your same ideas, but speak to. And I think it's important to be respectful and polite with people. But I think having these, when you're in a safe space, and I mean philosophically a safe space. I don't understand why you would want to be in this philosophical safe space. If I'm on stage and asking questions, I want people to challenge me. I so often at talks say, look, this isn't a safe space for me.
Yeah.
My ideas are
we have later a random question for you, so it's no longer a safe space.
But I think and the thing is, with a lot of the things that I work with, they're opinion based. So there is not a correct or an incorrect answer, even though intuitively most people may lean towards one or the other. And I think from a young age, I always thought that if someone could have the total opposite opinion to me, and I may detest that as a principle, but I can't say they're wrong, because that I might find it abhorrent, but that doesn't mean they're incorrect. And I think that would be one thing actually to chase knowledge and experience that I don't have. And you might learn something, go, do you know what, I need to amend my thinking because I wasn't quite right, and you've made me realize. Or it may cement that actually I believe more in what
As always.
yeah. But I believe the principles I have, I believe more strongly in them because I've seen the error of that ways. And I think that leads to balance in yourself. I think balance in your opinion and talking about things and exercising that and being challenged on it makes your opinions more robust. And it also, I think, the balance point is something else to focus on as well. So I remember a couple of years ago, quantum conference, there was a few people there afterwards, and we all had big bags under our eyes, and you could tell just how hard everyone had been working, and which is great. We throw ourselves, we love our work, we throw ourselves into it, and this is really good because it's what we love doing, and that's great. You can run, and when you do that, you can work a ridiculous amount for a long time, and it's fine. But you should leave yourself a little bit of a buffer zone, because if something goes wrong outside of work or life, it's hard to keep that going. And very quickly, you can things like burnout and all sorts of mental challenges, things like that can come into play. If the things when the things are running smoothly, if something goes wrong, it has an impact on other things. So that sense of balance is important as well. Just being able to manage yourself and what gives you joy.
Yeah, and I think this is also what I understood is the main principle of your entangled position. So always keeping in mind what could go wrong and balance this, and not only just do matchmaker and sell people to other people, but rather have a holistic view and take care of those guys, and also give the consultancy.
Yeah, and I think a couple of things that I learned in my early stages of recruitment that kind of vouch for that. So is so as a recruiter, we want to have all the nice conversations, everything goes well and brilliant, but we earn our value from actually looking at what may go wrong, and if that does go wrong, what happens, and that's where a lot of our value comes from. And there was a sort of a phrase that one of my colleagues in my sort of first year in recruitment, my colleague had a phrase say, "The calls that make you squirm make you earn." And it's very much, you don't want to make that call, you don't like it, but it's really important, and you need to do that, and you face up to those challenges, and it's a really important lesson that sort of stuck with me on that. So there's not kind of that epiphany moment. Or the other thing might be, actually, don't worry about the double slit experiment. You don't know what that is yet, but you will. Accept it.
Which brings me to a question. There are different threads in the Entangled Health where we could go some very deep technical. So I guess we don't go deep technical with you on quantum. And another thing, philosophical question. And as you said, you are not the deep quantum expert, which makes it even more interesting. So do you know of different quantum interpretations of quantum theory? And I mean, Schrödinger's cat and observer dependence or so. Something that touches you at all, or is it completely irrelevant to you?
No, so I do, but more from an interest point of view. So weird enough, so I have, when I'm on video calls, often my cat will come across, and that's a great thing, because first of all the Schrödinger thing, and also everyone goes, "Oh wow, isn't he cute? What's his name?" and things like that. So it's quite nice, and he seems to know when I'm on videos, and he will come across my lap more often.
Okay.
But actually, I think so. So in my role, I'm almost a supporter to the quantum ecosystem. I'm not doing anything quantum myself, but I'm a foundation or something leading into the quantum technologies. And I think with that, I would probably look at something that led into quantum in that way, and I would look at Michael Faraday. So it's slightly changing the nuance of the question, but I think there's value.
Yeah, go.
Obviously, with his work, it was with sort of electromagnetism and things like that. These are sort of steps that lead into the quantum, sort of first quantum revolution. And one thing with Michael Faraday, so he had no formal education, came from a very poor background, basically he is now kind of the, you go to the Royal Institute and it's basically his front room. You had the Faraday lectures and all of this. He's a giant of science from very humble beginnings.
Yeah.
And in a time where science wasn't in England, at least in sort of the Industrial Revolution and the time that things were happening there, science was very much for the for the wealthy, for the educated, for the privileged. He was came from a very poor background, and he had John Clark Maxwell doing his working out. Arguably the greatest mathematician ever did his workings out for him. Tied it up after him almost. And I just think that's fascinating, and so from. And I think these things are often overlooked. Ada Lovelace was possibly the other person I was going to go with on that. But I think that there's such a good example there that from humble beginnings, people can really make a difference. And that's someone that's always fascinated me. And out of all the talks I've given, I'd love to stand at Faraday's desk at the Royal Institute. I've had friends say I want to do a TED talk and all that, but Faraday's desk is that's the place.
It's the desk.
Yeah.
Which brings me ultimate performance. Woodstock moment of your career. So if you could build a Woodstock, quantum Woodstock. So
of my career.
Of the ultimate performance of quantum recruiting, including everything you could ever dream of.
So I think actually I think one of the nice things in quantum is the fact that there are opportunities for such a broad range of people. So I think if you're looking at that Woodstock moment, I'm not sure there's a particular moment because we deal with people. So or for the physicists, messy biological systems. So there isn't. It's not like the eureka moment or anything like that, because these things that these are sort of changing jobs and people, individuals. They're a journey. They're not a single moment in time. They're parts of a wider journey that interact with each other. But I think to look at the sort of quantum ecosystem. So I think that there's. We sort of touched on inclusion earlier.
Yeah, we have.
And diversity. And
diversity, at least. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that there's so much that quantum can do to demonstrate to other areas of really good things.
Yes.
And I think that's something that's important. And there are perhaps later on in the talk we can move on to some of the challenges around that. But I want to get I think let's go with the good first.
Yes, good first, and then we skip the other one.
But I think there's definite examples to give to other ecosystems as to why being inclusive and having a wide range of sort of diverse people and skills is important. And I think that's a lesson that can be learned. And we're in a journey where you've got the sort of the quantum ecosystem that's been a bubble, is now that bubble is opening up to another bubble, and there's classic coming in, and we've got to. I think it's really important. We need to safeguard what makes quantum special from that ethics, morals, scientific excellence, innovation, standards, these things. We need to keep that and absorb the best of. And we need to absorb the best of the commercial world. So, timekeeping, project management, productization, these sorts of things, that are so normal. What we don't want to do, we don't want to have that we don't have the scientists talking about how to run sprints and the business things. We are marketing and all that. And
the Germans making the humor.
Exactly. Oh, Thomas, come on there. That was quite good there. But what we don't want the sort of the ethics from politicians and we want to keep the best of quantum, the best of the classic, the non-quantum ecosystems, not absorb the worst of the non-quantum stuff and keep the worst of the quantum stuff. There's lots we need to learn from the outside world, but we need to be careful. We're absorbing the right stuff, not the wrong stuff, and we're giving lessons. Lessons is the wrong word. We're setting examples.
We are being a role model for
Exactly.
And actually, it's true. So when I don't have much students, but at least regularly I get some crazy people who want to do their masters with me, and it's really licking blood, and in a positive sense that you say, "Wow, this is so nice and friendly, and everybody is constructive." Still, even though we have all the major players in hardware now trying to compete with the best machine, and we have a bit more money in the game now, still it's very super friendly, and I think that you made a very good point here. Yeah.
I think part of that is where things came from. It's quantum's a small ecosystem. It's growing rapidly, but it's still small compared to most other sectors. And I think actually there's a number of people that have been around for a long time. And I think it's important we set the standards on that. We're able to help put the ladder down for people to come and join and actually convey the ethos in the right way. And within quantum technologies, really they're just going to be technologies at some point. We all know that. It's just if you look at the quantum revolution of the last century, people don't talk about microchips and transistors, and they don't say about vacuum chambers because we don't use them. But all of these things kind of from the last century, that they're now just part of the tech stack within quantum, and that's what's will happen with the stuff we're working on now. It won't be amazing. It will just be something that if it doesn't work for 10 seconds, we get angry. But at this point, we're still in this space where actually there's a strong ethical, moral aspect to it behind what's happening, and I think that's a big thing. And you need to be with that mindset. You still need to be streetwise. You still can't be you can't be too nice to all people, because sooner or later someone will take everything off of you if you're not guarded. But actually, you need to find that balance of not being naive, but actually keeping that spirit and being able to assist others. And actually, as science grows from these sorts of things, standing on the shoulders of giants.
Yes. Yeah. Cool. Yeah. I need to let our listeners appreciate this. No, it's really cool. So I learned from you precision and timekeeping. I'm just looking at the clock. So that in this Entangled Health, I have always this dopamine section. So if you don't mind, I'm going to start the quantum computer for you to pick a question. I have 104 questions. So later, after you answered, you can contribute yours. So I just need to press the button to start the machine. So it will sound a bit crazy, but that's part of the game. We should record this as video, so we should have seen that. Good.
So, we'd get cancelled.
Yeah, we have
my dancing.
We have had the picking. So it is again, and I think so. I did run it on hardware. The machine was again IBM Brisbane, so maybe I should ask for sponsorship for that. But and it did pick question number 81, which reads, what's your favorite way to connect with people from different cultures?
Oh, good. So as often as possible, I think. So
it was a good question for you. I think it fits. Yeah.
So I think so. So I'm someone who's traveled to a lot of places. I've spent I've lived in sort of Brazil and Panama, and often when I travel, I don't necessarily do the tourist stuff. I try and get under the skin of a place. So, for example, I would much rather go for a barbecue in someone's garden than go to Christ the Redeemer or something like that. That's kind of so. I think actually that food is a really big thing. I love eating, so I learn how to cook well and things like that. And when I travel, I always try and take a little bit of the food culture. So I like to eat with people and have home cooked food and what you can learn and maybe share some of my food and the sorts of things I've maybe
come over.
I like German food and beer. and I think it's such a nice way of sort of integrating and learning and developing, and it's a nice social environment. So I think that's important. And the other thing I find as well is that, so when I travel, I try not. So as a Brit, the Brit abroad stereotype, I try and be as far away from that as possible. So whenever I travel, I try to. I first things first. I respect the culture I'm in. And the same when you're speaking with someone, you respect their culture and maybe add a little bit of yours to that. But I think if you're within someone else's, if you're in the same way, if you're in someone else's house, you treat it with respect. And I think that's an important thing. And I think, so I think it's you need to respect the other cultures, and sometimes there's things you don't know or aren't aware of, so find out about them. And and I think when you're respectful, it's quite interesting how humour doesn't always translate. However, it kind of can if you approach it in the right way. It can, though. So the sort of jokes that that school children might tell that that don't travel well. I'm not talking about that, but little things, like facial expressions, hand gestures, sort of ironic sort of body language, and things like that.
It's supposed to be funny.
But you can sort of do and it's about interacting with the person and laughing with the person. I think that's a really nice way, but you have to be. It starts with respect. Like I say, I think the best vehicle for it is food. And I think and curiosity as well. If you're not curious, you probably won't get the most out of it. And there was a nice phrase that I learned some time ago, is that travel is the best cure for racism.
That's true. So we hope more people would travel to more sites. Thanks. This is amazing insight. From just looking at the clock. So sometimes when I'm on a podcast, I'm after it's done, I think he or she could have asked me that. So this is why I give every guest the opportunity to ask a question I did not ask and you want to comment on. And we will take this question then as your question to the pool, and eventually in a later far future, many years down, the quantum computer will pick your question for another guest. So you want to have one?
Yeah. So I think I can actually, if I can sort of split this, because I think there's a question I think would be good for future guests.
Yes.
But there's also something else that I'd like to just touch on that's maybe a little bit away from that. So perhaps
you get double bonus. Go.
So in terms of the kind of the question I would raise is who do you most want to benefit from your work? So I think for me it's probably slightly different to a number of the guests that you may have on, because I'm not making a thing as such. I'm enabling people. And I look at it, and it's kind of the bog standard answer that a lot of people give, but with some bells and whistles added onto it. So I think what we're doing with quantum has got such far-reaching potential, and it's an incredible opportunity there. So I think that quantum, should be. I would hope that my work is beneficial to all, but what I wouldn't do is have the usual restriction that most people have, that all just means humanity. Because I think, why are we stopping there? Humans are already the most privileged thing that's ever existed. They're, the top 0.00001% of life, and and I think I think it's important that humanity benefits from quantum. But actually, I think why are we stopping there? It lacks so much ambition. It's so limited that the things we're doing, we look how much, if some of the things we get right, we can take the pressure off of the other things that share the world with us. And I think, why do we limit it to just those that look like us? They're like, I know why. It's nature and nurture. We've evolved to do that. We've taught to do that. But that shouldn't be. That shouldn't be. That shouldn't be right. And I think actually there's a lot of potential to go past just helping those that are most similar to us, along with helping ourselves. So I think that's what I would most like to see, is that it's a holistic benefit.
Yeah, from Gaia, so to say. Or
And us as part of that. And actually, I think that the one of the things that I think we kind of touched on earlier that I'd like to maybe mention is about the inclusivity angle. And as I mentioned before, quantum starts from a really good place relative to older industries, because we're creating this ethical framework. We're learning from the past mistakes of others, and it's founded on people who genuinely care or drive to do the right things. So I see the challenge is more about how to do the right thing. More about how to do the right thing than why to do the right thing, should I say? But, and this is the but, much of this is driven by academia and political thinking. So, academia and politics, these are elite groups. They're not necessarily the sort of the common view held by most people, and they're really important what they do. But it's not the only game in town, and I think this is something that we kind of take this guidance, and we work with really bright scientists, and they have politicians and people like that telling them that this opinion is right. It's an opinion. It can't. We mentioned this earlier. It can't be right or wrong. It's an opinion. Now we may agree or disagree, and that's different. But if you look at we look at some of the systems put in place. So we want to have, say, a representative workforce. So we put arbitrary things in place, saying, we want to aim for this type of people, this type of people, this type of people. So when we work with clinical trials, what's the gold standard? Randomized double-blind trials.
Ideally on a wide different population.
So why do we do randomized trials? Because humans are inherently rubbish at creating a random group from their own mindset. We know that. And yet, when we try to create a workforce, what are we doing? We're going all against that. now, I think so. When we look at these topics, these are the things I think that need to be unpacked a little bit. Is because until the last few years, I was never asked to focus on this group or that group, other than the odd occasion there might be an individual hiring manager that said, well, ideally I'd like to hire a woman because we don't have enough women, and I want that thinking. I heard that now and again. I had to never put that in an email. It's illegal. You can't.
You can't do that.
But obviously it registered. I wouldn't not send a man who was right for the job, but obviously it registers. But more recently, and this is different in different areas, there's more of a focus on trying to select from certain groups of people. Now, I think it's very important we have this representative group, but there's an issue if you're trying to create that group from someone's opinion who hasn't really they're not analysts, they're not, that's a think tank. They're a think tank, basically, and their ideas are valuable, but to implement that, and when this is put into law, this is basically apartheid. In action, racial segregation, apartheid.
Just the other way around,
whichever way around, it's the systems of apartheid, and this is racial segregation, and I think it's important to note that the idea behind it is noble. We want to have opportunity for all, and basically flatten the barriers to entry. That's really important. And also create the more intellectual diversity you have, the higher performance you have, the more you learn both in the job and as an individual. But I think that the mechanisms are problematic, because then you have to work out if you're really successful and this group's suddenly overrepresented. Okay, what's your trigger to then make? Then you need to discriminate against that group because you've been successful. So I see why it happens, and I think it's a tool that I can see why the tool is used. But I don't see that it's a long-term solution to the challenges. I think actually it's about a more holistic approach, and this takes time. So I'm not saying that you go totally with one side or the other, but we need to factor this. We need to factor this in and look at what are the success metrics, what are the failure metrics. So with a scientist, you have the failure principle. So and this is something. So from as an agency, we pretty much consistently we run at 2/3 of our placements being female, and 2/3 of our placements being ethnic minorities. So this isn't coming from a place where we're just a sort of a thought process and opinion. This is something that we don't actively practice. Valuing people more or less because of characteristics they can't control. We treat them as an individual. My view of what this means, and this is just my view. But I think that when you look at it, I think when you look at the female ratio, I think because people aren't very good at hiring women potentially, or feminine mindsets. This is something that there's a challenge around it, because people are following these guidelines and think, I'll do that, and that's solved, and they're not thinking of the why. Yes. So what we do is we treat people as an individual, and I think with our clients, there's an appetite to hire women more, but because they're getting it wrong. I think if it was 50-50 in a workplace, our ratios would probably mirror that. I think because it's out of kilter, our ratios will then be...
So you just mirror,
it's kind of the inverse, because we're adjusting so that to create that more diverse thought process within the team. And so what we do is we don't create a system, or we don't create an environment that would rule those people out. We encourage you to talk to people as individuals, and there's a lot of research around the masculine and feminine mindset. So you put a job spec out. If you have lots of bullet points, a masculine mindset is more likely to say, well, I've got 4 out of 10, I'll apply for it. A feminine mindset is more likely to think, I've only got 9 out of 10, I can't do it.
And
part of our role is to basically demystify it, flatten the barriers, and explain to them, actually, this is fine, and we've got confidence. And you enable that. I think when it comes to the ethnic minority, so most of the work we do is in sort of Europe, North America, societies like that. But quantum is a global ecosystem, and most people in the world aren't from Europe and North America, or that.
Not even from Britain.
Exactly. So actually, and I think where we have this transient workforce that moves around the world, it's a natural byproduct that a large percentage of the people aren't the ethnicity, the major ethnicity of that country, and actually. There's a lot of times where people will put these things in place that try and encourage one group or another, and actually this isn't something that's necessary. I think there's I can understand why people do it, but I think moving past that and actually not having the blockages in place is much better. And we work with people from all over the world, so you may have. So I spent a lot of time working with quantum entities in Africa. And it's fantastic because there's so much drive, enthusiasm, and there's some amazing people out there. And I always think if you've got a team of people, and say you've got the scientists that have come from MIT and Oxford and and all of this, the best education all of their life, and that's fantastic. They're an amazing resource. But then you put someone from maybe the sort of global south, a couple of people from the global south in. And you look at how their work ethic, their joy, their relish work, how that rubs off on the people that have everything, and you create this composite output. And I think actually the challenge isn't saying we need this number of this and this number of that, albeit that I can see why people may think that. But actually, why do you need that in the first place? You need to get past needing that. That's the important thing. And by saying we need this many of this and this many, you're kind of contributing to that noise on that discussion. And there's a lack of authenticity. There's when you're saying we need this many of this people, this many of this people, and you say it's anti-racist or anti-sexist by being racist or sexist. You undermine the principle.
You just introduced the principle in the first place.
It's almost like there's no tolerance for intolerance.
Yes.
What are you talking about? And I get it, but we spoke about echo chambers before, and in the corridors of academia that speak about this thing, it's an echo chamber. We've heard people at Senate in front of the Senate saying words to the effect that genocide's fine as long as it's not against an individual. Well, genocide can't be against an individual for a start. And also, how can you say that in good conscience? But you have an echo chamber, and it's not to say people are good or bad necessarily, but their ideas should be challenged when they're. These are important topics. These are really important topics, and I think by the end goal is breaking down why we need these things. If these are a tool to get a job done, I get it, and it's a short term thing, but it's kind of like the juxtaposition between equity and equality. Both important things, but in some areas they're diametrically opposed.
Yeah.
One's kind of the fast forward button, but one's more sustainable, and there needs to be a lot more thought into why we need these things. How do we get to a stage where we don't need these things? But there are certain people that get power, money, and privilege by creating confrontation and difference between people, and that's never going to change. So we need to sort of get beyond this thinking of this, and it doesn't mean that we clear all of these principles out of the way straight away and say they're all wrong. But we need to look at how do we make these principles redundant, because it doesn't matter.
Yeah. And I think you're in a fantastic position just because I mean you are the orchestrator or the conductor or whatever, and in the end, I think very often we have also a handicapped or mentally disabled in the family. So, and then sometimes it's really by best intent. I want to enforce inclusion. By doing that, I'm discriminating everyone just for the sake of getting rid of discrimination. And I think once you just make people aware of that, because they're just, I mean, nobody's doing this. I trust the good people. So I think nobody's doing this by intention, but just because they think I want to do the good thing. So therefore we need to have more X in this position because the X are underrepresented or Y or Z or whatever. And by doing that, you discriminate each and every one. Yeah. And not knowingly. And I think
exactly. And this is why I mentioned it's more about the how than the why. Thinking quantum, the why for the most part is relatively well catered for. It's the how. It's the how that's the challenge. And because academia on these subjects is very much an echo chamber, but because quantum is a lot from academia, this mindset has been really cemented in.
Okay.
It's not the only thing, because this is also the same in politics, I think, which has similar reasons.
I was thinking you're talking about politics, not just kidding.
But I'll give you an example. So, in the UK, so I don't know if you know which the most educationally disadvantaged group is in the UK.
You tell me.
It's white working class boys.
Yeah, I would have got
now within that, this has been since the last century. This isn't a new thing. This is since the last century. Now within that, this group is being told that they're privileged. They've got this, that, and the other. Whilst they've got the most educationally disadvantaged, they've got the lowest upward social mobility and the lowest upward social mobility and the second highest downward social mobility, and this is 30% of the population. Now, these things don't get spoken about. Now, I think actually this isn't to say other groups don't have challenges and problems
themselves. And
it's not. And I think you get into the situation where there may be people listening to this thinking, well, I've got this and I've got that, and it's not a whataboutism. It's not that because of this, it means that the situation with you is less important. It's not. But people create division. There's a division between these things. Actually, it's not about creating division between different groups, because and even within groups there are individuals. This is what I'm trying to get to. You need to break it. This is why we speak about the individual.
Yes.
We don't apply characteristics based upon that every person's an individual. I think what we need to do is get past this. For me, I think when you start grouping people based on these characteristics, it's really problematic. And I get it. We work in an industry where everyone loves data. If there's no data, it didn't happen. But that doesn't work with messy biological systems. Yes, you're not a piece of data. You're a human being. That when you listen to music and feel that way, can you put that in data? Can you give me? Can you tell me what the standard unit of privilege is? Can you tell me what the standard unit of privilege? Then I can tell you what the data is. If you tell me what that is, I can tell you what the data says. Until then, and actually, we need to get past this.
Yes,
we need to get away from this measuring people against each other. What we need to do is is actually make it so that everyone has the equal opportunity to develop and work. And I think we need to get past some thinking and actually look at these things and come away from this creating divisions. And that's something that I'd really like to see. And I think quantum could be a good vector for it. But there's a bit of education that needs to come from that.
So, dear friends, thanks for listening and entangling to the Entangled Health podcast. Feel free to like it, share it, subscribe on your favorite platform, and if you are inspired, join our guest and submit your question for future guests. Join the conversation either via sending an email, following us on LinkedIn, commenting under the episode. Stay curious, stay connected, and keep exploring the unseen with Entangled Health.